Fashion has always had a large impact on society and culture around the world. Current fashion in the media has the power to dictate most of, if not how everyone in a certain area or time frame will dress. The 1970s, however, cheated this rule in the most spectacular of ways. The 70s, also known as the time of anti-fashion and the Me Decade, evolved the population of the United States. There was no direction for fashion. No one was really sure how to dress. The people decided it was their right to wear what they want. It was either total fashion freedom or total anarchy, depending on which way you look at it. Despite its early influences from the 60s still hanging on by a thread, 1970s fashion did all it could to be different. This is where women's fashion really took a stand. For example, before the 70s there were two types of skirts, mini and maxi. The mini skirt hemline fell above the knee while the maxi skirt covered the entire leg. The combination of the two created the controversy of the midi skirt. The midi was a skirt whose hemline was lower than a mini skirt but still showed more leg than a maxi would. This was thought to be a symbol of women's changing roles in society. Feminists often protested against the sexualizing of their clothing, but at the same time refused to conform to how the fashion industry manipulated their clothing. Despite the fight to be different, fashion eventually gave in and reverted to its more conservative style once again. Nonetheless, this time of confusion emphasized the option of fashion. Even with the drop of hemlines, lace continued to be emphasized in women's fashion. After the flop of the midi and the resurgence of the maxi or the granny dress, came the revolution of trousers. This all started with the creation of the hot pants. Hot pants were basically short shorts made from more expensive and luxurious materials such as velvet and silk. Because hot pants were made to be sexy and show so much leg, they were often associated with prostitutes and therefore could not survive in a formal workplace. Despite all this, there was still an increase in the conservative styles that attempted to reach that of leisure as well as stay true to dressing to suit oneself. This movement was key for women's liberation from their former selves. Around 1971, there was an increase of women entering the workplace which called for a more conservative look. Feeling the empowerment and freedom of choice at the time, women chose a symbol of masculinity to make their own, this symbol being trousers. 1971 saw trousers sales skyrocket as the sales of dresses spiked. Although women wearing men's clothes were traditionally a large taboo, this movement only progressed the fashion industry. With trousers now on the rise, the popularity of denim and blue jeans also took off. What was once seen as the blue-collar man's work attire is now a symbol of adolescent freedom. Although now in mainstream fashion, jeans were still stuck between anti-fashion and simple street style. Author and street style expert Ted Polhemus argues that the authenticity and sense of subcultural identity which is symbolized in street style is lost when it becomes this year's fashion, something which can be purchased and worn without reference to its original subcultural meaning. Jeans may not have been the most creative threads at the time, but they certainly fit the style of unisexual as well as practical. To this day, jeans have survived massive fashion changes. As far as fashion went, young urban blacks tended to stray away from the now generic white middle-class look. The black community had its own style influenced by celebrities like James Brown as well as movie characters like Shaft. Unlike the vast majority of the population, the black male found comfort in looking sharp. This included ruffled shirts, tight pants, black turtlenecks, and leather coats. Certainly no jeans, overalls, or lumberjack shirts. This eventually evolved into what was seen as the pimp look. Maxi coats, white fur wraps, and flared pants became popular with the black community, even despite the fashion's implications of drugs and prostitution that came with the style. By standards of fashion, blacks were the best dressed community of the 70s. By the mid to late 70s, punk rock made its way into the spotlight. The punk style was deliberately revolting. The clothes were made from cheap fabrics such as plastic, denim, and lurex. The same fabrics that were once discarded by the fashion industry were now salvaged by punks and made into this intimidating clothing. Clothes were always ripped and worn and decorated with vulgarity, pornographic images, and even safety pins to hold up unrelated garments, such as patches and even undergarments. The goal of these young punks was to look bad, and to do so they brought taboos like sex and violence into the light by way of their clothing. Black leather became popular because of its relation to sadomasochist sex, and shirts printed with swastikas were publicly worn on the streets. Punk style is a perfect example of the pure brutalism that characterized the fashion industry by the late 70s. Along with punk rock, disco also had a huge impact on the fashion industry. With the release of Saturday Night Fever, disco took off and helped fashion reach new levels of creativity and expression for both men and women. Platform shoes, bell-bottoms, and loud patterned suits took over the disco scene. People wore clothes that stood out to fit in. For women, swirly skirts and ruffled dresses flowed as they hit the dance floor. But disco was by no means conservative. Disco helped introduce the underwear as outerwear. Slip dresses, micro mini skirts, and spaghetti straps all became very popular with the disco era. The 1970s were truly a unique era for fashion. The clothing trends changed so frequently that it's impossible to pinpoint any one style and label it 70s fashion. This is what the era was all about, not conforming and simply wearing what pleased each individual.